Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's one after, so I'm just going to go ahead and get started. We have quite a number of those who have registered already connected, so that's a great sign. My name is Allison Dewey, and I'm excited to share with you today how one of our valued clients enhanced their communications using SharePoint. I have a couple of folks from the Marquee 360 team with me, but I am going to call out Charlene, one of our account executives. If this conversation is of interest to you, if you are thinking about and actually building an intranet perhaps with SharePoint, I would encourage you to reach out to her. You are certainly welcome to reach out to me as well. For those of you that don't know us, I'll just briefly introduce you to Marquee 360. I see a couple of familiar names, so you'll just have to bear with us for those few moments. And then I'm just going to share with you, not any particular order, but just, what was the situation with the client? What phases, I suppose, we went through and what solution did we develop? As far as who Marquee 360 is, so the company was founded by industry veterans, and we are currently a Microsoft Gold partner, specifically in the area of work management and the Microsoft 365 cloud. And the vision of our founders was to, create solutions that enhance operations, boost efficiency, and drive growth by maximizing the tool set that you have as a Microsoft 365 subscriber. So we partner with our customers to basically innovate, automate, and build efficiencies that overall elevate team productivity. So I mentioned innovation, that's an area of focus. So, we like to use what you have. So we strive to extend the Microsoft 365 platform. We actually work very closely with the Microsoft product team, so that helps us service you even better. And a lot of our custom solutions are built taking advantage of Power Platform capabilities. We certainly are focused on customer success. We hope that you engage us as a trusted advisor. We take a consultative approach to our designs and what we do select as that back end element. Is it going to be SharePoint? Is it going to be the Dataverse? Is it going to be a custom app? And we then are with you all along the way. So we offer not only the development and implementation services, but we provide support, and we do that with education and training. We have you can have a dedicated support team, and we offer hypercare support, and then ongoing workshops as you determine that you have some additional needs. So as far as this specific conversation, so our client, just as an organization, their core offering as a business is identity authentication and access management solutions for the healthcare industry. And what they had a new CEO, and what they realized was there was no single source of company information, and they wanted to build community and also elevate the general awareness of those in the company. So they put forth a goal to keep employees aligned, informed, and motivated. And that basically encompassed between 500 and 1,000 staff members. So when we talked about, well, what's a good way to do that? It was obviously with the creation of a intranet. And the overarching requirements basically of any intranet should be consistent navigation, consistent structure between the sites, because typically an intranet will have, different landing points, different areas of information, for it to be visually appealing, and that it be easy for those that were going to maintain the content to do that with ease, right? We didn't want to be adding a significant chore to their, weekly or monthly responsibilities. So we landed on SharePoint, and again, one reason for that was the company was already a Microsoft 365 subscriber, so they had access to SharePoint online. There would therefore be no need for additional intranet software licensing, and SharePoint is scalable. So while we were focused on building an intranet for, basically promoting or communicating, there was thought that in the future, they might want to create areas that were more targeted for department internal collaboration. And also as part of this project, we only started with a few key departments. It was like there was finance, there was sales, there was IT, there was marketing. There are other teams out there that they wanted to fold in, but they needed more time to get organized. One example being the legal department. So again, using SharePoint would support that scaling of the solution over time. And then SharePoint, just has some great features, such as its integration with the Office suite, right? So if individuals were developing new spreadsheets or new PowerPoints, it would be really easy for them to have that immediately be stored in the appropriate place within the intranet. SharePoint, you've got your enterprise grade security and compliance, and then as time goes on and they think of ways that they would like to alter or enhance the intranet, there's the potential for automation and other AI capabilities. Plus SharePoint is globally accessible, and even though you might think they're maybe not the largest organization, they did have offices in the UK, Germany, and Australia. So that's why SharePoint Online proved to be a good solution for them. You may be asking, why didn't they use Teams, right? When Teams came about, it was like, well, how does Teams compare to SharePoint? When do I use what? So the reason Microsoft Teams was not part of this conversation, I mentioned they wanted it to be visually appealing. We have limitations as to what we can do in Teams. Also, Teams is more appropriate when you are looking for a collaborative workspace. And that wasn't the purpose of the intranet. The purpose of the intranet was just to, make available information, again, in a visually pleasing format. And that intranet content was going to be managed just by a few individuals while being consumed by a larger audience. Again, Teams is more of a collaborative space. So when you're in a team, chances are you're all working on whatever the content may be. Now, I've been working with SharePoint since it was called Windows SharePoint Services. And back then it was awful. It really was nothing more than file management, right? They were pushing it as a content management solution. SharePoint Online today is definitely more of a business collaboration platform. Yes, certainly you can use it to store, organize, and share information, and people can access that from any device so long as they have internet connectivity. And yes, it's for that content management and knowledge transfer and team collaboration. But now when you go to create a SharePoint site, you have two choices. You'll be prompted, would you like a communication site? And a communication site supports that concept of, oh, this is going to be a site where maybe we have, 5 individuals are maintaining some really relevant content, and it's going to be consumed by the whole organization. So it's all about broadcasting information, sharing content for viewing, not editing. The other option you have when you go to create a SharePoint site is they'll say, do you want a team site? That's not to be confused with Microsoft Teams. All they mean is in the context of that site, they're expecting all the members are going to be content authors, and that's a place they're going to get work done. Think about like collaborating on project deliverables. Like maybe you're responsible for presenting at a trade show. And so, you have multiple individuals that are working on the presentations, organizing battle cards, who knows what. But that's a working environment. And when I say it's come a long way, so yes, we can still share documents, but now there are ways to, publish announcements. Along the way came the ability to create and manage tasks if you don't have a better solution for that. Sharing calendars. Now, I don't mean sharing in the meaning that those calendars would be available in like your Outlook client, but it's more like a marketing department might have a calendar of upcoming campaigns. And so I can go to that marketing department site to see, hey, what are we going to be talking about? What's exciting and new? And the way we can now structure SharePoint, I can have those things even roll up to the top of the page, to the very top site, if it's something that I think the whole company should be aware of, even though it's being managed in a different area of the intranet. You can certainly still use SharePoint to maintain a knowledge base, but then also it's a great way of putting forth quick links to either internal or external resources that, the individuals go in search of. So before I get into our approach, does anyone have any questions? Anyone confused about anything? Okay. So when approaching this situation, we took a user-focused approach because again, the goal is to empower and educate staff on what's going on. So if it's not pretty, if it's not organized well, if what's in it is of no value, they're not going to use it. So again, we wanted to create an intranet that had valued content and was going to be structured in a way that was easy to navigate, and therefore making it easy for the end users to find the content that they needed, the information that they needed. So we had working sessions with each of those departments I mentioned. And first we asked them, like, what information is valued by the rest of the company? Like what emails do you keep getting? Like what are people, interrupting your day for? So we went through an exercise and also said, like, what did they think was important to them to make sure was in the spotlight? When we started talking about that, we did kind of find that they just automatically also included, and hey, for us, as a working group, this is things that are important to us. So we identified that, yeah, there's going to be a future state, and it's probably going to have some sites that are more restricted, and they support the inner workings of the department. So we captured some of those and put that aside. Certainly in the case of the intranet, we needed to know, like, do you have existing content that needs to be moved into the solution, like a library of PDF quick reference cards? Have you identified who's going to be responsible for managing what? Because that would impact how we configured, permissions and security and even the structure. And as we were talking to all those different departments, what was nice was common elements were surfaced. And so that helped us then figure out, okay, as a starting point for every department that we're talking to, and then future departments, There'll be a standardized layout, a recommended list of elements that they might want to include. And so this was, so very early on, we kind of came up with this, you could call it a wireframe. It was kind of a concept. This one is specific to like that landing page that, there would be a message from the CEO. There would be some recent highlights. We would provide those quick links to resources that are frequently sought by the company. Also, when new employees would come to the organization, their browsers were bookmarked to open up the intranet immediately. And so they wanted to kind of make those people feel welcome by giving them quick access to some of those onboarding materials. And then we had, some employee news, right? Highlights, celebrations, list of birthdays, as well as work anniversaries. So that was kind of, what came out. That's an example of what came out of these working sessions. Now, I've mentioned files a couple times, but when it comes to an intranet and wanting to, get attention and things, to be presented in a visually appealing way, um, you should take advantage of pages. So in SharePoint, you can create basically a web page. And you saw in that wireframe, like what are the types of things we can literally drop on those pages? We can drop leadership announcements. We can drop a calendar of event. We can drop a listing of employee celebration. We can drop news. Document highlights. So what I mean by that is, let's say there is a library of company operating standards and procedures, and they might get updated from time to time. Whenever there's an update, we can actually have a window into that library that shows the three most recently updated policies and procedures. There are ways to present dashboard of metrics, and then you also saw like we can drop quick links to resources that might be used. As far as the visually appealing aspect of that, if any of you are into web development, you hear the term hero image, right? That's when like the first like 2/3 of our screen are filled with some sort of graphic and a little bit of content, and usually it says learn more, and we can click that and navigate somewhere else. There is a way to prevent those images in more of like a slideshow format. This client actually, they had a chili cook-off and they wanted to promote that. So they actually used that slideshow mechanism to showcase some of the photographs that they had taken as part of that. So this events listing I mentioned to you, if we structure things right and teach the content managers to tag like maybe their most relevant or exciting events. Content like events and content like news posts can roll up to that top page. So that's neat. And even though I said if any of you are web developers, there is no need to be a graphic or web designer to maintain this moving forward, or then even add more as time goes on. We'll talk about all of this. They're called web parts. You literally drag and drop and you fill out a couple of prompts. So you can do quite a bit. So when we were having those conversations with the departments and trying to, come up with ideas, company news was something that they thought was important. And so what would that be? And that, it would be partnerships or acquisitions, promotions, opening of new locations, or the launch of new products. Employee engagement, you saw they included anniversaries. If you're thinking about building an intranet, these are some ideas, right? To maybe provide the opportunity or publish the opportunities you already offer for opportunities to volunteer. And you heard me talk about policies and other operational procedures, like putting that on your intranet so that people can just go there and explore. That's a good thing to consider putting into an intranet. When we were talking to the departments and learning like what people look for, we also talked about like, well, where would it make sense to have that content reside? We weren't part of their company, and so it could be, we could have expected one thing, but in their world, it was a different way. So we did spend quite a bit of time planning the navigation, planning the structure, and the reason that going through that planning process is so important. Again, you want to make sure like this is going to be easy for the users to access, and you want it to match the way they think, because that's going to reduce confusion and increase efficiency and basically help the company get a return on the investment they've just made in building this intranet. So now it's time to structure the sites. And if you have been using SharePoint for a while for other things, it used to be you would create a site. They called it a site collection. You had your top level site, and then you would nest subsites under it. That is not the way we do things now. With SharePoint Online, or you hear them call it the modern view, that practice has changed, where now we create standalone sites for every site, pretty much where it makes sense. So like, I mentioned they had marketing. So marketing had their own site. I mentioned HR. Instead of HR being a subsite off the main site, it's its own site. And the reason we do that is, first of all, it's easier to manage when it comes to SharePoint permissions. You can get a real like spider web going on when you have things, nested. So it's much easier to manage from that perspective. And then also it's just easier to add more, right? Instead of, drilling down, and now the file paths or the URLs are starting to get really long. It's just much easier to create, and then also to navigate a flat structure. And that you might think, what? We'll talk about that in a minute. Because what we do with those individual sites is they get grouped. I said under, that's not really a right. They get connected to something called the hub site. So that way we can logically organize all these little standalone sites. The hub site does support consistent navigation. I'm going to show that to you in a minute. So whichever site I'm in, I'm always going to have a standard top navigation bar. When I mentioned news rolling up and events rolling up, that's because of it being part of a hub. And then you can easily change it. Like, you can add to it if you wanted to restructure. It's so much easier to change those connections than have to like physically move sites from one site collection to another. So that's the way we're doing things now with SharePoint. I mentioned the hub navigation always is at the top, and then the sites will have their own. So let me just, it's kind of hard to maybe understand without some sort of visual. So let me show you here. And I realized there was another thing I wanted to share with you, so I'll do that next. So this is just, use some templates. Microsoft has a couple of templates. I'm going to show you the SharePoint lookbook. So you can see, it's a pretty graphic presentation. This is that hero image I mentioned. We've got some information over here about different facilities and what time it is. countdown to the next big event, resources, news. But up here, this is that hub navigation. So we made this organization site, right? Kind of like the main site for the enterprise. We made that, whoops, the hub. And then we created a marketing site. We created an HR site, and we connected them to the hub so that they are always present. If I go to marketing, you're going to see this changes, but yet I can still get back to the home. I'll click on this in a minute because it's a little bit different. But you saw, like, now that I'm on this enterprise homepage, I have a link to who we are, what's happening, resources. If I go to marketing, this top nav bar stays the same, but hey, here's our brand strategy. Here's the help center. Now, HR, what they wanted in this example is they too are a hub, meaning that, in the context of HR, we offer professional development, and we do have an internal space for HR department collaboration. So the HR site was also defined as like a mini hub. And so from here, I can navigate these different HR related sites, but I can also return to the home. Now, what you might have noticed is in these sites, right, we had this site navigation here. We had the site navigation here. We had the site navigation here until I picked on this internal site. All these sites I just navigated are examples of communication sites. Really, they're just different in layout. They're also different in security. I'm not going to get into that right now. This one I mentioned, HR, they wanted a secured place for them to kind of internally work on documents and manage some other content. You'll see the site navigation is on the left. So that's kind of a little key indicator, which type of SharePoint template was being used. I wanted to show you, so Microsoft has this site, it's called the SharePoint Lookbook. And I would encourage you to check it out. Just Google SharePoint Lookbook. It's the first thing that gets returned, or go to Edge and use Bing. And you'll see here, so for site types, so for communication, this is nice because it gives you some ideas. Like, how about, a communication site for human resources? How about a communication site for employee onboarding? How about a communication site about all the volunteer opportunities we offer? And so you see, we've got different colors, different ways of laying out the pages. If you click on any one of these, it'll tell you like, what the highlights are of this particular design, right? They're showcasing the latest brand assets and how to use them. They're providing examples. They're giving answers to frequently asked questions. So those are some concepts. And you can see the same thing with Teams. Like when might I need a working site? People who are developing learning materials, they might want a working site. So just a couple of resources for you. Right. So, I like to think of it as one and together, right? We created all these little independent sites, and then we hooked them to the organization site as being the hub. Any questions? Okay. So what we did was we created that site for the organization. Oh, hi, Anthony.
Hey, good afternoon. Thank you. I just really quick, I wanted to ask about this idea behind a hub site that you're using, right? And then there's these sub sites that are kind of related. Is the idea that you have different content editors targeted? Those are the subject matter experts. So like, for example, if it's HR, it's HR content editors, right? It's nobody else that are managing the sub-site, so to speak, content. Finance, it would be finance subject matter experts that are managing that content. But the hub is just kind of like bringing it all together. So I would expect there to be somebody who's a lead on making sure the hub and the sub-sites make sense. I don't know if you could talk about that just briefly, how that
Yeah.
makes sense. Yeah.
Yep. And I actually have a slide that kind of, but you're exactly right. So, I mean, there's no true wrong way to do it, but this client did exactly that. They had an HR site. I think they identified two individuals that were responsible for maintaining the content in HR. Same with marketing. They had a small team that was going to take ownership. However, a couple of those marketing people, because they're marketing, they also were made content owners at that topmost site. So you can have some, depends on what your needs are, but fundamentally, yes, HR was managing theirs, finance was managing theirs. And then as far as keeping it all together. So in their case, their IT department had rights everywhere, and we taught them how to manage content because inevitably they were going to be the support team as well, right? So they would need to know how to do that, maybe be able to cover if somebody was out of town. We're actually now having further conversations where they want to make sure content doesn't get stale. And originally they were going to leave it like up to HR. And I was like, how are you going to do that? That's an awful lot of work. So IT is going to own that, but the way they're going to own it is by retrieving, you can get log files from what's called Purview, and they're going to just download those log files from time to time and sort, by different bits of information to be like, you know what? Nothing in policies and procedures has been updated for like 6 months. Let's ping the content owner and just make sure, yep, that's true. Or, oh my goodness, I need to, freshen that up. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you very much.
Okay. So when I was mentioning those pages, we figured out that, okay, we're going to create somewhat of a common structure. To give departments a running start, because again, they're not, they're not marketing designers, all of them. Also, if there was some common structure as people moved across the sites, they would know, oh, I can always look to the right nav bar and see who the key contacts are in the that particular department. So each one of those sites got a landing page, and they may have had a couple of additional. For example, I mentioned they had multiple facilities. So in their case, what they did was they had a facility site, and then they gave the UK site a page, and they gave their office in Germany a page, and they gave their office in Australia a page. Again, there's no right or wrong way to do it. It's just the approach that they took. Behind the scenes, those pages are kept in something called SharePoint libraries. They're very similar to, folders that you see in your Windows File Explorer. All the assets that they dropped in, the pictures, that too was put behind the scenes in document libraries. So once we trained the content managers on that, then they knew kind of the mechanics of it, and it wasn't such a scary thing after all. So again, we had that organizational site. It served as the hub. Everyone in the company was considered a visitor. Everyone could read everything here. And then again, as I just shared, then there were a designated team within IT. They owned it all. They could do anything in any of these sites. These are the sites we created: an HR site, a facility site, a marketing site, and an IT site. And basically these pages provided most of the content that people would be looking for. So again, at this stage, all the employees are visitors. They can all read everything. Then we had the members. So we had some HR people. And in their case, they weren't worried about people going into others' sites and editing it. And it made managing security a lot simpler. So they just put the HR content managers, the facility content managers, the marketing, the IT into just something called the intranet members. And again, they didn't care. Probably marketing was going to get pulled into updating a lot of their pages anyway. And then again, that IT team, they could do it all. I was using the phrase dropping earlier when I talked about setting up the pages. Basically, when you're building page content, you're doing it in using these things we call web parts. You can then edit most of those right in place. So if you're a content manager on the page, there's an edit button. And once you open that, all the web parts can be manipulated and they're very easy to configure. You're usually choosing some properties, adding some text, creating some links. It's really once you've been oriented, it's different. I won't say that, that it's not. It is a different way of working, but it's really not that tricky. And so again, I said, we started to see things common across the site, like quick links. We saw events, facilities, that world clock. That's really cool. It helped people realize, like, are the people in Australia, or have they gone to bed yet, or can I still reach out to them? So those were some of the elements, some of the web parts that were common from site to site. When you create a page, they are organized into sections. So in our case, we had a main section, and then we had a smaller section to the right where, again, we were dropping in these web parts. And in their case, so remember I was highlighting, so you had that site navigation. Every page had a banner. It was recommended that after the banner that they have a hero image to highlight, really cool things. A lot of them then also in that same area had a place for any important announcements. Then they had access to quick links, those views into the most critical few documents, and then they were allowed to add more. They wanted the organization to really embrace this, make it their own. So that's what we did. And just so, let me just pull up my little sample here. Not that one. Right. So when I talk, right, so this is, do I dare? Here, I'll do this just so you can see. So I'm hitting edit on this page. So I get my little toolbox and see each one of these is a web part. Right, adding links, pretty explanatory. Click, I can go ahead in here, and this is how I can make some changes. Document library. I can edit, what I want to go on. So it's pretty easy to, and if I wanted to add more, before I had the toolbox that was visible, I could drag and drop. So it is something you need to learn, but it is pretty easy. And it is possible also to have things in a draft state versus a published state. So you can make changes that nobody else is aware of until you're ready to be like, okay, let's let the world see this. So, and that kind of leads to this, right? I said it's not scary as if you take the time to learn. So part of our service to them was transferring knowledge. We explained to them how things were structured. And this is specific to what we shared with IT. We showed them how it was structured. We educated them on the concept of the SharePoint groups and permissions. We taught them how to manage the content. We taught them how they could, continue to add people to those groups. If like future content managers came on. And then for the individual business units, those content managers, we taught them about page structure and we taught them how they could go about managing their content. And that's good regardless of any change you make, right? You should always be providing some sort of knowledge transfer, education, and support. So just, my advice to you is that if you are thinking about establishing an intranet, doesn't have to be on SharePoint, but if you're a Microsoft 365 subscriber, I would encourage it. But you want to make sure that you're considerate of the end user. Don't think like, what would IT want? Who are the people that are going to use this, and what would they want? What type of content do they expect? Where would they think they would find that? And then structure the site based on that need. Um, Again, that's going to ease ownership. It's going to position the site to scale. And again, we can use that hub system to organize things and reorganize as, the times change. We didn't talk about it a lot. I did mention we asked the departments if they had content that needed to be brought in because they were so visually oriented. A lot of it was just populating those web parts. If they did have a library of PDFs, there weren't a lot. But if you're building an intranet for the first time and you have this massive network file share of stuff, I would say don't plan on a lift and shift, right? Go through these first two steps, figure out how things are going to be structured, and then what you would do is map your existing content to that new home. Microsoft, if your content is in a file share or maybe is already in a SharePoint server locally, there is a Microsoft free tool that helps with this mapping and moving. So, and then there's another one that's really nice, but it's a third-party product, so it comes with a price. But it's called ShareGate. That's the one that I have had some past experience with. Those individual sites, we structured them using a standard as a starting point with web parts that we found were kind of common across all the departments. And then we positioned everyone for success by providing that training. Now, the one problem we had with this was, when did we say the project was done? Because an intranet is going to always be chaining. And it made it hard to be like, we've maxed out our scope. Yes, there's more to do. There's always going to be more to do. So, one suggestion is like, start with a champion. Like, what one area do a lot of people go in search of information? Like HR is a great example. So if HR is on board, maybe you just start with the organization homepage because you need that hub, and then pick the first department. Once it's launched and the company gets comfortable with it, and then other departments say, "Ooh, we want a place in there too," then you can do each of those as individual, maybe projects that are better controlled. Somebody has a question. Can you speak to how you get metrics? Yeah. So it used to be fairly easy. You used to be able to go into your site settings and there was like site usage and some reports. Those are no longer found there. So then it was, okay, you needed to go into the SharePoint Admin Center. Usually only IT staff has that level of access, but you could ask your IT department and they would go in there. Now, that activity is captured by Purview. So we're actively trying to do this for this customer now. And what we're going to be doing, we could have either just taught them, but they want somewhat of an automated process. So in Purview, you can query the logs for certain activities, with several SharePoint activities being part of those, part of the data that's available. And you can either just view that on screen the way it's presented. What this customer wants is to actually capture that raw data and develop a dashboard so that the CEO can see, how did this idea work? How are people doing? Is the content staying fresh? So really, if if you just want to take advantage of out of the box, you just need to get into that purview and learn about those reports. There's some good resources on the Microsoft Learn site. Or you could connect with Marquis and we can assist with you. And that leads me to my suggested next steps. If you're thinking about building an intranet, if you're thinking about re-engineering an existing intranet, or you're actually thinking about a migration from, maybe you have SharePoint on premises and you want to move it to the cloud. We would love to maybe have, a second private conversation with you. But that's all I had to share. I think someone on my team is going to drop a survey, a link to a survey in the chat, but we do have about 10-ish more minutes left. So if anyone wants to ask some questions, I'm happy to stay on and do that. All right, everybody. Well, then we will go ahead and end the meeting since I don't think I need to stay on for anyone. So again, thank you for your time. Please reach out. Charlene's available. I'm available. Go to our website. There's a contact us form. So many different ways that you can connect with us if you'd like to continue the conversation.